Hello, world, and welcome to Creating Light with Kelsey, courtesy of being in one of my childhood bedrooms. This exact room is where I grew up as a teenager, and it's purple as fuck, man. I This looks really weird on video looking on it on Zoom. This is the only room like my parents have we they moved into this house. I'm 31 now. I was Duh, how old was I? I think I was 13. So they've been here in this exact house for a while. They've renovated this house. A lot of different things that they've done. The one thing that has not changed is the color of this room that I grew up in. All the walls are painted, that's for sure. That's been done for a while, but they have not touched these walls. So there's that. But just a little personal update before we're going to be diving into the episode because I'm in real time living this stuff right now is decided to visit my parents for a month. 6 weeks, I guess, to be exact, that I would be around family. And that is the most time I've been around family since like either 18 or early 20s. I moved out at 18, but I was around in between breaks and all of those things while I was in college. And then at 23, like I fully moved out and wasn't around. And then I moved to Florida when I was 25, and then I really wasn't around. And now I'm 31, and I'm back in this house that I haven't set foot in years. Because when I would visit Illinois. I wouldn't come to Missouri to my parents' house because most of family lived in Illinois and my parents would go to Illinois. So it's like, all of that. So this specific land and location, there is something here beyond, way beyond my conscious awareness or knowing. It was literally just intuition saying, hey, it's time to go home for a little bit. But this is just landing. This, because what you'll be listening to today is an OG episode, and I'm talking about depression, and I'm reflecting on the time. It was like the last year that I was here in Missouri, and I was very depressed. So it's interesting now. Now it's 2025, and I'm recording this back on the land that I was originally very much facing myself for the first time and understanding all the darkness that was here. So that there's probably something to that. But since I've been here, there's been a lot of synchronicities, and that's how the universe works. That's how God works. That when you listen to the pulls and you listen to your body and you listen to your intuition, which is intuition is the channel for spirit, God, universe to speak through you, whatever words you want to use there, and you follow through with that, like miracles really do get to take place. But you gotta like take action on those intuitive hits. Like if you just feel things and know things, but then don't do anything, then the miracles will not follow. They will not meet you where you're at. But some deep healing has taken place and just unconscious things and unexpected conversations with my parents and reflecting on a very hard time in my life. Like the darkest part of my life is what's been naturally coming up with my parents when I was in my early 20s. And we're having conversations, which is so just universe got jokes because years ago I was begging to have these kinds of conversations, but it was through the lens of my own pain and suffering, and I was just pushing myself and forcing it and demanding it to be a certain way and to surrender instead of accepting what was and surrendering to what was. And I wanted it to be my way, and I wanted justice, and I wanted to be right and feel heard instead of just like receive all around. And and as I've been coming into like feeling my own anger, coming into acceptance, coming into forgiveness, all within my own healing journey and taking radical accountability for that, then I feel called to come back here and be around my parents for a long time. And everyone that like knew that I was going to be coming here for an extended period reached out to me that like still lives in the area that I'm in contact with, and was like, if this is too much, my house is open. You can come stay here. You don't feel like I know you're coming here and this was your decision, but don't feel like you have to like be at your parents the whole time. Like my place is open. So just like putting that into perspective, like people were actively reaching out saying like my place is open. You don't have to stay there if it becomes too much. So that like that puts things into perspective, but I don't feel the need. I haven't needed to take up that option at all because it's been so beautiful here. And now being here in this new perspective and this new lens and this new layer of healing and not seeing this land and this house and my parents through the lens of my own pain, these conversations are happening, healing is happening, and not in a way that we're like, we have to sit down and talk about this. It's just we're chilling, and then something organically comes up, and then it turns into a healing conversation. So yeah, it's very interesting. That's real time things that are happening right now for me that I wanted to bring to the forefront, and I'll be continuing talking about it as it integrates. But yeah, because it's connected. Get this, because of course, why wouldn't it be? That's the miracle of it all. That was beyond my human understanding. It's all connected to me sharing my story on the podcast because major puzzle pieces have landed for me on that very dark part of my journey, the part where with my past relationship that I hadn't publicly shared yet, but now I'm starting to. I just got key information that like I this is such a new awakening. Like my perspective, my lens has widened so much by being here and what my parents have brought to the forefront. Things just make so much more sense now from that 5.5 year period of my life from when I was 21 to 25. So not a coincidence that I'm in the middle of sharing my story on the podcast. I come here, I receive more information, more understanding, more integration, more acceptance. So now I get to plug that in at such a divine timing on where I'm at in the podcast and where I'm at in sharing my story on it. So, yeah. But today we're talking about how avoiding my own trauma turned into depression. And this episode back from 2021 brings up a hot topic that is continually growing in the healing space, spiritual healing, therapy, mental health healing, and wellness all around is the questioning of like, is this depression or is it unaddressed trauma? Because a lot of those lines get blurred. But now, as I'm speaking now in 2025, I have even more awareness on that of like how that even got muddied was through the colonization of how mental health was created, was to break down a human into these symptoms and saying that something's wrong with you instead of looking at the human in indigenous ways of what's wrong with the environment that's creating these symptoms within the human instead of the depression clinical lens is looking at the human that something's wrong with it and then you have these symptoms and then this is like a end all be all situation, but again it's taken time because one through generations in history of colonization, and now it's starting to flip the script, but also it started with white people of questioning of like, oh, hey, is it really depression or is it all this trauma when people of color for all this time have been telling us that, and indigenous people. So it's just I want to uplift that in this episode, the people that I'm speaking of that have talked about this like now quote unquote new refound research, it's actually not new, it's ancient. And it's the people that I mentioned in this episode are white people that talked about like, oh hey, is it trauma or is it something else? And even in this whole more research that keeps coming up to the forefront, it's a lot of white people that are still bringing that research up when it's originated from indigenous people and people of color that have had this mindset this whole time of, is it depression or is it trauma? Or now, is it colonization? Are we a byproduct of colonization and capitalism? And this is actually an appropriate reaction to the world that we live in because it's actually not sustainable and not honoring the human at all. Because I will say, as a white person, it took me a minute to figure out because that's the white privilege at play. We're blinded to so many systems that we created because why would we see outside of that naturally? It's something that you have to go through as white people, go through your own awakening in that sense to be able to see it and to understand it and to see how it's all connected. And I mean, the rabbit hole goes deep, my friend. And for us white people, like there's this huge layer of accountability of what has been caused and created through us and our own lineages as white people and the harm that is still being caused because of these systems. So that's what I'm really wanting to bring to the forefront in this particular episode, and really in any episode that's talking about mental health, is like widening that lens of looking at the human responding to their environment instead of looking at the human as symptoms and something to fix. Because, like, for me, in this particular phase of depression that I was experiencing, it was at the beginning of 2017, and I had just left that abusive relationship, and my trauma was slamming to the surface. I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't have the tools, I didn't have the capacity, and then depression was here. Of course, depression was here, and it was such a protector and lifesaver to suppress all of those big major emotions and memories and just reminders within the environment that I still was living in, so I could function in daily society in some shape or form. Like the only energy I had was to go to work. Everything else was like not even, I was not there. That didn't mean anything was wrong with me. That means I just left a horrific situation and my whole body and system is doing the best it can with the tools that it has to keep me alive. And like, of course, I'm going to be sad. Of course, I'm going to be numb. Of course, I'm not going to have any energy. Of course, I'm going to have like zero affect and motivation to clean or to cook or to hang out with friends. Of course, that's going to happen in that specific situation that I was in. And it's the same for people that are living in this hurtful system and thinking that something's wrong with them because if they feel constantly depressed, like where if you're in a job that doesn't care about you at all and is running you into the ground, like of course you're going to be exhausted. Of course you're going to have little motivation to do anything. Of course you're not going to be feeling like socializing if it's, but then of course you're going to feel trapped because you got to pay your bills. Like of course. That's the conversation here, and that's the opener, and that's the grace, and that's the mercy and compassion to have with the self when this comes up, because that's where things, I think I've mentioned it last episode or something. I don't even know. I record these things and I sometimes I forget the order, but because I batch them, But like things don't change out of one, the knee-jerk reaction to fix. We just gotta hold space. And then two, out of shame or condemning. Like things change through compassion, acceptance, and love. Because that for me, that's what my depression was asking of me. And that's what my trauma was asking of me, was like to be held, to be seen, to be witnessed, because life is really hard right now. And that's what we just need to be in that. And how do we adjust after such radical change, after living in darkness for, at that point, I was in the relationship for 2 years and we're in this limbo period of like, now what, And also, I would say, now with my more this is a continuous trauma informed lens and training that I'm on because of the work that I do, and that's what I'm so passionate about, is a lot of times too, one, avoiding my trauma turned into depression, yes, but two, it could also be more of functional freeze at play instead of depression, which is a trauma response freeze. And what's so wild is I can pick that up and I'm understanding the difference more where someone's feeling depressed and how, and as a practitioner myself, how to support them in that. And then when is it functional freeze and how to support someone in that. But in our Western world of mental health and specifically psychiatry, people will go and describe certain things because one, psychiatry appointments are not even real therapy appointments, and a lot of people I'm discovering have that misconception. They'll go and book a session with a psychiatrist thinking that this is also going to be therapy and be helpful, and you get one and the same. That is not the case. You meet with a psychiatrist, you're there with them for like 15 minutes, they listen to that story and get like a speck of the whole picture and then diagnose you, which goes on your medical record permanently. And then they give you a prescription and be like, boom, here, do this instead. And it's like, oh my God. But with that, because they're not actually with you and getting to know you as a human, they will just slap that label of depression on you. When a lot of times it can be functional freeze, it can be you living in a current trauma response. And so if it's a trauma response instead of depression, the medication helps for depression and those neural pathways in your brain. It's not going to address the thing that's looking like depressive symptoms if it's trauma. So that's where you might take medication for depression and then not really notice a difference. And that could be still consult with people. That could be a sign that like, oh, maybe this is functional freeze instead of depression. But I had one of my clients know that, listen, this is what blows my fucking mind. She figured this out. This is before she came to me, but she figured this out on her own through fucking TikTok and asking like questions on the internet that it was actually functional freeze instead of depression. She figured that on her own. And when she went to tell her psychiatrist that, they're like, no, it's depression. These are all the symptoms. Like it just makes sense. And then that authority in that white coat, like paradigm, then she just got prescribed that medication. And then she comes to me and saying, like, I think this is functional freeze. And I was like, I think you're right. And that just blows my mind that a supposed trained professional in the mental health field didn't even have the space to question the differences of what was going on. And it's just this automated thing at looking at a human as symptoms and prescribing things instead of the whole picture. And a different rabbit hole to go on of how women and people with uteruses have different hormonal cycles. Every week is a different way that we would be experiencing and feeling our own internal world. And what is invokes such rage in me is when you look at the symptoms of depression. Those are the fucking things that I feel when I'm on the like on the actual week of my cycle of my bleed and even the week leading up to it. So that can be up to 2 weeks out of every single month. And the way to be diagnosed with depression is if you have these symptoms for 2 weeks. So then 2 weeks of the month, I can experience those things. Sometimes it's more or less severe. But I don't fret about it because I'm like, this is the normal cycle of my body, and I flow with what's here instead of resisting and thinking that I need to be the way of that our capitalist patriarchy society pushes us to be all of the time. Because that's not how my body is biologically wired to exist in that way. Like I flow with a hormonal and emotional state every single week. So that's what is enraging to look at as a woman of like the the symptoms of depression that people get diagnosed with are, for me, normal symptoms that I can experience at different parts of the month, every single month. But at this point, it's like I know, like I don't feel depressed. This is just a natural, normal emotional wave for me. But with people that don't know that and then feel that they have to be a certain way that society has and our culture, our colonized culture has now plaqued us to be, then of course you're going to think that something's wrong with you. So anyway, there's all that. There's my soapbox for today. And you'll listen to more as the 2021 episode starts. But just that, this big overarching take home question to get curious about. Is it depression or is it a normal reaction to life hardships, trauma, colonization, capitalism, patriarchy? Ask that question before anything else. It's just getting curious, you know? Actually, one last thing, because you know what's easier for our society to keep operating in the way that it's been operating is it's easier to have these feelings and these experiences and then go to a mental health professional and then have them slap this diagnosis on you, which again, if you get diagnosed, that's on your medical record for life. When it's ever evolving state of existing, that's a whole thing. Yeah, because what's easier is to experience I almost lost my train of thought for a second. I had to like be like, what were we saying? But it's easier to experience these things, go to a mental health professional, and then that professional slap this diagnosis on you and then tell you that this is just how you are and it's permanent when like nothing is permanent in that sense of the world of emotions and feelings. It's easier to do that and say, this is just how it is and this is how you are, instead of questioning the system and the environment, because then that's what perpetuates the system. It's like, oh, I'm feeling this way. Oh, well, we're gonna just call that depression and not question why you're feeling that way or what that is going on in every other sense of the word. And here's a medication as a to help you with that. And so just keep going as is and not change anything because this is just how it is and who you are. It's easier to do that instead of question the whole paradigm that we've existed in our Western culture. So yeah, that that is now all I have to say. And if you're also like, okay, well, what the fuck do I do with that then? I encourage you to find, and you're still needing help and assistance in the support, and you don't want to just sit with depression as a fixed state and want to be curious about these things, but then what do you do with that information once you're getting curious? I then that's where you find a practitioner that has this view that doesn't have the colonized view, that isn't stuck in this mental health paradigm, that opens up and has this traditional holistic view and in reverence of the ancestors and having this understanding of how we even got here. Like that is how we open that curiosity, and having practitioners and healers going to them in that way as mentors and support system, that would be my suggestion. But okay, now to the episode that continues this conversation from like 5 years ago. Welcome to Creating Light with Kelsey. I am an art therapist who believes that the only way we can create light in our lives is by having the courage to feel our darkness. On this show, I will discuss trauma and ways to heal through modalities like art therapy, sexuality, and spirituality. I have been called to share my story to show that even in the midst of pain, I have found purpose. So join me as I continue the healing journey and create light within while feeling the darkness. I hope it inspires you to do the same. Hello and welcome to another episode of Creating Light with Kelsey. So far I've shared with you all my healing journey, where it had started, and then I had shared that it didn't immediately take place. So that just even though I set my foot on the path of healing, didn't mean that I just jumped all the way in. I like dipped my toe in and then I walked away for probably a couple years. But I wanted to share that there has been a correlation between experiencing depression and avoiding my trauma. That when I face my trauma or even consistently face emotions to work through it, my depression decreases. So it was difficult for me to understand that concept though, because it was easier to chalk it up to the fact that I was depressed and this is just the way it is. And the book The Body Keeps Score touches wonderfully on that subject. I am in the midst of reading that right now, actually. It has confirmed some of the thoughts that I've had so far in my own healing journey, that whether or not is this depression or is this unresolved trauma? And it explores this idea that a lot of diagnoses out there are actually a trauma response and not just this thing that you're labeled with or left with, or this chemical imbalance. It's something that once you get to the root, it can be healed. And I mean, I truly believe in that as well. And it's just interesting. I didn't really know that this book would elaborate on that subject, but I'm happy to be reading about it. And I'm definitely curious to keep on diving into that so I can talk about that more in depth and have more knowledge on the subject. But right now I'm just kind of bringing it to the table because that's what came up in my own healing journey at this point in time. So what a coincidence that I'm reading that book while talking about that point in my healing journey. Also, the holistic psychologist on Instagram, and she does have a YouTube channel, but I think she's been way more active on Instagram lately. She believes this as well, and she is a psychologist and believes that everything is a trauma response. And I actually just bought her book as well, so that is coming in the mail. So all the things, all the learning, I'll put her info and then her book that is now for sale, and then the Body Keep score in the show notes. But anyway, back to the story. At that time, though, I really thought that I just had depression, and then this was going to be the rest of my life and something that I would have to continuously deal with, when the reality was that the more often I kept avoiding and suppressing, that's when the depression would come up, and I just wouldn't understand why I was so sad all the time, but it's because I wasn't sitting through and working through my emotions. And again, I'm just speaking from personal experience here. I fell hard for that victim of sadness, that I'm just sad and that's how it is, and I'm going to go through periods of life where I'm sad and then there's nothing that I can do to make me feel better. It was a destructive cycle. I have another poem for you all that I would like to share, and it is a poem that I wrote in December 2017, so this is still happening within that first semester of grad school, and I wrote it about depression. Okay, here it is. Depression is a mysterious thing. I never thought I'd have to force myself to do the things that I know make me happy. I never thought I'd be this tired. I can't afford to sleep this much. I have to be productive, but here I am, sleeping. I don't want to close myself off from the world. I want to experience people, the sunlight, but the comfort of my bed and the weight of my blankets just traps me inside. Why is being alone so depressing? I come home to an empty room. All I have are my thoughts. My thoughts. They trick me. They convince me that I have no one, and no one wants to be around me to hear about my day or spend time with me. That the walls are my only friends. All I have is Facebook and Instagram mocking me, tricking me into believing all these people are happy, have friends, and I want to be them. But I need to be me. People say, "Oh, don't sit around and feel sorry for yourself. Get up and go after life." Well, it's not that easy. I don't feel sorry for myself, but just because I find myself unable to move sometimes doesn't mean I'm a failure and incapable of spreading my wings. Well, all right. Yeah, I hadn't looked at that probably since I wrote the thing. When I had said I want to experience people, the sunlight, but the comfort of my bed and the weight of my blankets just traps me inside, that just brings me back to the last episode. I had talked about that when I was starting to work on myself, when I would do things that make me happy or grow, it often made me uncomfortable. And if I got too uncomfortable, then I would just spiral back down and back into my comfort zone in the destructive habits and depression and feeling all of that sadness and being in that story, because there is comfort in that. And then that just kind of shows, saying that but the comfort of my bed and the weight of my blankets just traps me inside. Like just in the comfort of where I'm at and not doing anything. Which is also the comfort of avoiding. I was avoiding, I was obviously sad, but I wasn't really letting myself feel sad. I was just being numb and kind of like a zombie, instead of feeling the sadness because there's always a place for sadness, and it's a completely valid feeling, but it's different when you feel it and honor it and accept it and or ignore it. For me, this thing that I thought was depression that had this hold on me was actually my trauma. My pain, my trauma, my shadow side. It was begging to be acknowledged, and I just wasn't acknowledging it. It was seriously getting to the point of rocking me to my core, and it was becoming a force to be reckoned with. And a part of me knew that if I kept ignoring it, it would just get louder. But I was under the impression that if I just did things that made me happy, it would be enough. Although doing things that make us happy is important and plays an important factor in our lives, but I wasn't feeling my feelings still. I was just, again, I was avoiding, like searching, like I had said, I was like searching for the next fun thing or the next thing that would make me happy and chasing this happiness, and I wasn't happy still. And I just needed to face my darkness. And then through that, I would discover the light. But I didn't know that at the time. I didn't know that in order to be happy, you had to accept all of yourself, which meant the dark places and the places that you didn't want to go to. And through that, it cultivates more light because you're loving and accepting all of you instead of just focusing on the happy parts or the positive. And little did I know that it would actually take about 2 years until I was ready to completely dive into the darkness. Which is okay, because realistically, most people cannot handle fully facing their trauma when they're newly aware to it, especially if they don't have the tools to emotionally tend to themselves in their daily lives, which at the time, I didn't. I didn't have those tools. I didn't know what to do with myself. So that's why my brain, in a way, was still protecting me to an extent, because it knew I wasn't going to be able to handle it if I took it full force. I became slowly aware of some of the darkness that lied dormant, and then I started to become aware when depression would hit. Then I became aware of certain behaviors that I had which contributed to feeling depressed. So through all of that long process, then I was able to get to a place of wanting to actually engage in self-care techniques that took me into the trauma, into figuring out how that felt and like fully letting myself feel that. But yeah, it wasn't until fall of 2018 that I started to work with the depression, trauma, darkness. It's all basically the same thing. That is when I had started the spirituality and art therapy course for grad school, and that was one, I mean, the beginning of my spiritual awakening, and then two, that was like the second layer of just my awakening in general when it came to the trauma. It was kind of like, oh, okay, this isn't going to go anywhere, and it never will, so how about we deal with it and befriend it and show it love, and then we go from there. Now, I want to touch on another line from the poem that stuck out to me when I was rereading it back. I wrote, I want to be them, but I need to be me, which is very interesting. For one, I was talking about social media and looking at all these people and like comparing myself to them, saying like how I want to be them, but then deep down knowing that I need to be me. And just that phrase in itself, like, I need to be me. I don't even think I knew who me was then. And I also think that is what was so earth-shattering, because I had no idea who I was. I was going through a huge transition point in my life, like entering grad school, and I had lost a couple friends then, like very good friends, and then I was no longer an athlete. I was also doing bodybuilding, and then I had stopped doing that when I was in grad school. So when I say athlete, like I wasn't a cheerleader anymore. That was completely done. And then I had stopped doing bodybuilding as well. And I was definitely to a point of like, who am I? What is going on? All I'm left with are my thoughts, which is another line that I put in there. All I'm left is with these thoughts now of my trauma, and what do I do now? Like, I am literally just in pieces right now. So yeah, I just find that line very interesting. I want to be them, but I need to be me. Like, go me for saying that, even though I had no idea what the hell I was doing, and I was definitely still stuck in my own destructive cycles, but I think I knew I was finally starting to figure it out. Like, I had arrived, finally, and I was at rock bottom, and I was in the depths of my despair, and that's where you figure shit out, where you can choose to figure it out, or you can stay there. And I was getting to a point that I was sick of my shit. I didn't want to feel like this anymore. I didn't want to be depressed and stay depressed. I wanted a life and something to live for. It just took time. It just took time to get there. And I just thought of this. Just like now, I am sharing with you my rock bottom, and now I'm not there anymore, and I'm spreading the light to hopefully encourage and emanate healing for others, that your story is going to help others as well, and it's not going to be your end. That even though some of you may feel that you are in your rock bottom right now and don't see a light at the end of the tunnel, I'm going to tell you that greatness is there. Like, greatness is still for you, even when you're in your rock bottom. So if you relate to any of this, just be patient with yourself while embarking on this healing journey. I mean, constantly give yourself grace and know that you are doing the best you can. I know for me that I often felt like I should be better or further along or something, and I can still feel like that sometimes. Especially, I would feel like that if I was looking on social media a lot and seeing all these things and people living this life, and that I thought that they were living this life that I made up in my head just from seeing them on social media. That would definitely make me feel like, oh, I should be better. I shouldn't be feeling like this all the time or further along, like I had said. Just know that every lesson that you're going through is a part of the life experience. And as you go through the layers of healing, that you are exactly where you're meant to be. Thank you for listening and creating light with me. If you enjoyed the show, spread the love by subscribing, leaving a review, or share it with a friend. If you related to this episode, reach out and let me know. Ways to connect are listed in the show notes. And until next time, remember, when we see the light in ourselves, we create light in others.